We begin in a world where everything seemed destroyed, Tokyo in 1946. A city that has not yet recovered from the terrible bombings. The streets are covered with rubble. The air is heavy with ash and loss. People walk around in torn clothes, with sadness in their eyes, but inside each of them burns an unquenchable spark of hope. It was at this moment that two men, Masaru Ibuka and Akio Morita, stood on the threshold of something that would change the world. They were not heroes in the traditional sense, neither politicians, nor military, nor rich. They were engineers, simple guys with ambitions who had no money or resources, only a huge desire to create. Their workshop was located in an abandoned department store, a cramped space with no heat and almost empty shelves. There, between iron beams and dirty windows, they built their first devices that others considered futile attempts. Their first project, a rice cooker, failed. It didn't work as it should have, and it nearly destroyed their hopes. But instead of giving up, they started all over again. And it wasn't just a job, it was a dream. A dream to show the world that a ruined country could create a future. A dream that would revolutionize an industry and change the way we listen to music, watch movies, and even play games. How did two guys in a small room in northern Tokyo build an empire that became synonymous with innovation? This is the story of faith, risk, and perseverance that formed the foundation of SONY, a company that not only survived the ruins of war, but also became a symbol of the technological revolution. In those years, Japan was not just a country that had lost the war. It was a place where even thinking about the future was difficult. Everything reminded of the loss. Burned streets, half-destroyed factories, the faces of people who had lost everything. But it was in the midst of this silence and pain that voices whispered, "We can start over." Ibuka and Morita had no plans to conquer the world. They simply wanted to create something of their own, openly and honestly. The first steps were ridiculous from a business point of view. A rice cooker that turned rice into porridge, and sometimes just spoiled it. Small electrical appliances that were sold so rarely that they sometimes didn't know if there would be bread on the table tomorrow. But it was these failures that hardened their team, turning every day into a lesson. They worked nights, experimented with transistors, soldered wires, tried new circuits again and again. And one day they did something that seemed like a small thing, but it was a turning point. They created the first Japanese tape recorder. It wasn't a revolution on a global scale, but it was something that no one in Japan had ever done before. The device was heavy, bulky, but it worked, and it worked well. It gave them confidence that they could create their own technology, not just copy Western technology. But the real risk lay ahead. In the mid-1950s, they learned that a new technology had emerged in America, the transistor. It was the future of electronics, small, cheap, efficient. Manufacturers in the United States had already begun making transistor radios, but for Japan, it was something unattainable. And yet Morita decided they must obtain a license to use this technology, even if it meant the end of the world. It was a crazy decision. The license was so expensive that it practically put the company on the brink of bankruptcy. But Ibuka and Morita agreed. If they wanted to become leaders, they had to take a risk. They bought a license from Bell Labs and began to build their first transistor receiver. When it hit the market, it looked unlike anything people had seen before. Small, portable, it allowed people to listen to music or the news anywhere. And although sales were modest at first, it was a sensation in America. Local teenagers fell in love with it. They could listen to music secretly from their parents, take the radio to the beach or to school. For America, it was a new level of freedom, and for SONY, it was the first big step onto the world stage. But to establish themselves in the West, they had to break another barrier, the reputation of Japanese products. In the 50s, Americans believed that made in Japan meant cheap and low quality. SONY decided to change that. They introduced strict quality standards, refused to save on materials, and did everything to ensure that each of their products was flawless. Morita went even further, decreeing that all key company documents be in English and that engineers be required to learn the language. This was not just a matter of convenience, but a step toward becoming a truly global company. Each of their new products was a little crazy, but always with a spark of originality. And in the late 70s, that spark turned into a flame when SONY released the Walkman. No one in the industry believed in this device. Who wants to carry music with them? Asked competitors. It's inconvenient. But Morita saw something that others did not see. He understood that people wanted music to accompany them everywhere, in the park, on the bus, on a run. And the Walkman became a symbol of an entire era. It changed not only Sony, but the culture of listening to music itself. It was the moment when the company stopped being just a manufacturer of technology and became a creator of a lifestyle. Yet, even in this time of success, the clouds began to gather. In the video industry, Sony launched its Betamax format, which was technically superior to VHS but lost the standards war. It was a blow that cost billions. But instead of stopping, they did again what had always saved them from oblivion. They took a risk. They decided to go where they had never gone before, the gaming industry. And this bet would soon change everything. Little did anyone know then that the conflict with Nintendo would set in motion the process that would give the world its first PlayStation. But for that to happen, Sony would first have to endure the greatest humiliation in its history. By the early 90s, Sony was already a legend in the world of electronics. The Walkman, video equipment, the music business, the company knew how to change people's habits. But after the termination of the agreement with Nintendo, Sony found itself in front of a wall. And behind this wall stood one and only opportunity, to make its own game console. The decision was made, but it required a team that would push the envelope. The project was spearheaded by Ken Kutaragi, an engineer who had already become famous for his unconventional approach. He was called Crazy Ken, not for his eccentricity, but for his ability to see technical solutions where others saw only dead ends. PlayStation developers worked in small offices where evenings turned into nights and nights turned into mornings. People brought sleeping bags, coffee machines, and even guitars to keep from going crazy under the pressure of deadlines. There, among the cables, prototypes, and endless test boards, a new era of gaming was born. But everything was far from perfect. Inside Sony, the project was perceived ambiguously. Some senior managers believed that video games were childish fun that was not worth millions of dollars in investment. Every meeting could end with the words, "We are wasting money." Sometimes Kutaragi had to literally defend the project, arguing with management and proving that PlayStation was capable of opening a new market for the company. Tensions were also felt within the team itself. The engineers working on the hardware were in conflict with the programmers developing the game tools. Some demanded more time to polish the hardware, while others insisted that the main thing was to give the game developers the opportunity to be creative. And yet there were nights when the arguments died down. When someone on the team would run a new test build and the 3D model would come to life on the screen for the first time, everyone would forget about their fatigue. It was a moment of magic when it became clear they were doing something that would change the world. Kutaragi often said to his people, "We're not just building a console. We're building a door to a new world. And people will remember who opened that door." These words became a mantra for the team that kept them afloat. When initial internal tests showed that the PlayStation could process 3D graphics faster than any of its competitors, even skeptics at Sony began to realize that they were dealing with something more than an experiment. But no one knew then that the most difficult tests lay ahead. The year was 1994. The air was tense, like the air before a great battle. For months, the Sony team had been preparing for what could be their greatest victory or their final downfall. The release of the PlayStation would change everything. Behind the scenes, things were far from perfect. Production issues, limited resources, constant technical glitches. The team spent nights fixing last-minute glitches, trying to find compromises between ambition and reality. The engineers and programmers were exhausted, but no one allowed themselves to stop. Every minute delayed their dream even further, but also brought their moment of glory closer. The smell of coffee filled the offices and the test room erupted in cheers as games on the screen came to life in stunning 3D worlds. For the first time, gamers were able to immerse themselves in a whole new level of reality, one where the lines between gaming and life began to blur. The release in Japan was a shock to the industry. Queues outside stores stretched for hundreds of meters. Teenagers and adults, fans and skeptics, everyone wanted to feel this new energy pulsing through every joystick. The success quickly spread to Western markets. PlayStation ceased to be just a console. It became a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of a new way of thinking, freedom, and creativity. But this triumph came at a price. The market began a fierce struggle. Competitors, especially Sega and Nintendo, were not going to give up without a fight. They attacked with advertising, politics, lawsuits. Investors demanded results, and Sony's management teetered on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Conflicts erupted within the company. Those who had previously doubted the project's purpose now demanded control and change. Ken Kutaragi's ideas sometimes seemed too bold even for senior management. However, the development team did not lose faith. They remembered those sleepless nights, those moments when it seemed like everything was going wrong, but their belief in the idea kept them together. PlayStation made the world think. It's not just a device. It's a new platform that opens up endless possibilities. Video games are no longer a toy for children. They have become an art, a business, and a cultural phenomenon that unites millions of people around the world. The console's success was the beginning of a new era for Sony and the beginning of a difficult but bright story that would change not only the entertainment industry, but also the lifestyle of many generations. After the huge success of the PlayStation, Sony began to look for new avenues for growth. The company could no longer limit itself to the production of electronics. The future, as before, required them to pioneer new areas. One of the boldest moves was the acquisition of Columbia Pictures, one of the largest film studios in the world, in 1989. This decision seemed risky to many. At the time, few people in the company understood how to combine the world of high technology and the art of cinema. But Sony believed that control over content was the key to true power in the digital age. They understood that it wasn't enough to create devices on which people watched movies and listened to music. They had to create the content itself. This move made Sony a true media giant, but it also opened up new challenges. The film industry is a completely different world with its own rules, ambitions, and conflicts. New employees at Sony looked at technologists with suspicion, and engineers could not understand show business with its incomprehensible laws. Internal conflicts were mounting. The technical departments did not always support the ideas of the film managers, who, in turn, viewed the technical ambitions as something too dry and practical. It was a clash of two cultures, technological and creative, and finding common ground was not easy. In music, Sony has also sought to strengthen its position by acquiring labels and rights to popular artists. They sought to create an ecosystem where devices and content would be inextricably linked. However, the early 2000s were a real test for Sony. The world was changing rapidly. New competitors were entering the market, smartphones were appearing, and the internet was beginning to dominate all areas. In this new reality, Sony was suffering. Mobile phones, once the pride of the company, began to lose ground to Apple and Samsung. Televisions and other home appliances were losing market share due to intense competition and rapidly falling prices. The biggest blow was the defeat in the mobile sector. Sony Ericsson, a joint venture between Sony and Ericsson, had long tried to take a leading position, but gradually lost market share, feeling pressure from new players. During this period, Sony began to undergo leadership changes, and not all of them were successful. Lack of a clear vision, bureaucracy, and conflicts between departments all created an internal crisis mood. Critics began to predict Sony's imminent demise, comparing it to other techno-dino companies, once powerful corporations that failed to adapt in time. But the Sony spirit, founded by Masaru Ibuka and Akio Morita, did not allow them to give up. The company focused on innovation in the areas where it could be the best: cameras, entertainment, and, of course, gaming. PlayStation continued to dominate. The PlayStation 2 and 3 set sales records and became the most popular consoles of their time. In addition, Sony actively developed the field of digital cameras. Their sensors became some of the best in the world, used even by competitors. This became a powerful support for the business. The revival began with a return to its roots, a belief in innovation, unique design, and a focus on quality. Sony began developing new products that once again amazed the world, even if they didn't always become market leaders. The strategy of integrating entertainment and technology played a huge role. Own film studios, music labels, games and devices began to work in one powerful chain. And now, In the 21st century, Sony has become a symbol not only of technology, but also of culture, inspiration, and creativity. Sony has come a long way from being an electronics manufacturer to becoming a major player in the entertainment world. After the crisis of the 2000s, it was the PlayStation 4 that returned the company to its position as a leader in the gaming market, thanks to its simplicity, powerful exclusives, and online services. The PlayStation 5 confirmed this success, offering innovations that took the gaming experience to a new level. These consoles became a symbol of Sony's rebirth, proving that the company knows how to adapt, take risks, and dictate the rules of the game even in a changing world.